Iowa basketball gets its guy. Ben McCollum is the new Iowa basketball coach. We talk about how Iowa hit a home run today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Away we go. The Iowa men's basketball team has hired their new head coach. It is Ben McCollum, as we've been talking about throughout the last week now, after Darren DeVries made the decision to take the Indiana job. This was something that I think a lot of people anticipated. A lot of different arrows were pointing that direction, and here we are. So we're going to break things down, talk about roster construction, coaching staff construction, how we think things are going to look in that front, what I was going to be able to do, some of the financial components to this. And yes, the portal is open. It is an important time, and Beth Getz got it done in time to make this, I think, very fruitful for Iowa. But we'll talk about all of that. Later this afternoon, the Iowa women are in action against Oklahoma with a shot to move on to the Sweet 16. We'll talk about that matchup. Huge weekend on the diamond as well. The baseball team with a sweep against Ohio State. And how about the Iowa softball team? Down 2 coaches, a lot of wild, wacky things happening inside that program. And now this be top 5 UCLA. How about that? We'll talk a little diamond. Plus the weekend that was in wrestling, as we talked to you before, the championship matches, 1 out of 3 in those final matches. But Stephen Buchanan wins gold, and certainly a great story there. So we got a lot to get into here today, but we open at the forefront of things, and it is the big news. Ben McCollum, the new Iowa head coach, and talk a little bit about him. So if you missed our podcast from the last week, we're with you every single day throughout the course of the week talking Hawkeyes. But if you did, just the background of Ben McCollum and getting to see him now firsthand, close to action throughout the course of this season. I'm located in Des Moines, live in Des Moines, and seeing what he was able to do with this Drake program. So if we go back to the end of January, when things were starting to fall apart for Iowa basketball, and I put out my first hot board, and in a way, it was a little flippant, right? It was kind of, I was not pleased after that performance out in LA. Let's just put it that way. And that's when I put it. And then they followed up with the loss to Minnesota. We knew it was trending, and it trended where I thought it was. Ray McCaffrey was going to be let go. But when I put together that list, Darren DeVries was at the top of it. DeVries was the guy, made a ton of sense. Local connections, building a brand, doing what he did at Drake, all the things that make a whole lot of sense we got into. McCollum was a little bit further down. I think my list wasn't in order, but I think I had Ben McCollum 4th at that time. Drake, of course, was out to an outstanding part. But the reason, at least initially, I was pretty tepid on Ben McCollum was very simply, they're playing incredibly slow. And that slow pace, after what we saw under Todd Licklider, I knew it was going to be difficult for the fan base to maybe jump aboard right away. Dive into the pool head first. We weren't going to be able to do that after what we watched during those 3 seasons. But it wasn't just the style of play. I mean, that wasn't alone in the problem that Todd Licklider had at Iowa. He was socially awkward. He was not a good recruiter. He didn't connect with the fan base. I mean, there's a long list, and that's just the start of it, of the reasons that he didn't get it done at Iowa. Slow pace was one of them, but not the only one. And I think we have to remember that. When you look at Ben McCollum and digging in and learning more about him, talking to more people that he's been connected to, this guy, he's a butt kicker. And he is a basketball savant. He knows the game incredibly well. He knows it at a high level. Those are all great things. But then to be able to teach it. And if you were just watching this weekend for the first time, if you watched Thursday night, the win against Missouri, even Saturday when they were just outmanned against Texas Tech, and with a couple of breaks or maybe a couple of different calls, that game could have been different. You watch the way that team plays, and you see, starting with the point guard, and that's something that he is elite at, getting point guards to play at a high level. And you watch Bennett Sturts and just think, well, does this translate? Yeah, it's going to translate to the Big Ten. You watch the way that this group of guys, not the most athletic team, not a team that's going to wow you with athleticism, how they play so connected on both ends of the floor, how they're running their system. They're doing the things. It is ball movement. It is cuts. It is movement on the offensive end. Yes, it's limited possessions, but also the reason that they played with limited possessions this year is because they had to. They weren't deep. And also remember, when he put together this roster at Drake, he didn't get the job early in the process. They were going through a run in the D2 playoffs. And because of that, he was already behind the 8 ball, coupled with Drake does not have the financial resources, certainly of an Iowa. Even at the mid-major level, Drake is not at the top of the heap financially when it comes to NIL, when you're talking about that next tier guy. And he was able to build a roster, helped by 4 guys from Northwest Missouri State, but also going out, bringing in a couple guys from Wyoming. Went to Indiana State for a player. They were able to cobble together a roster without a whole lot of depth, but was able to do what they did. Reaching the round of 32, getting a win outside of the first 4 for the first time since 1971 at Drake. Doing something that Darren DeVries couldn't do at Drake. Win a game in the round of 64. Ben McCollum was able to do that in year number 1. His past offenses played at a quicker pace, but he is a coach. He is a coach that is going to work with the style of play that makes the most sense for his team. He's not going to try to put a round hole into a square peg. That's not who he is as a coach. Yes, there are basic tenets of what he wants to do and what they're going to do on both ends of the floor. But I think what should excite all Hawkeye fans, after what we've watched over the last, well, honestly, over the last 40 years, 39, Dr. Tom, you did it. I know you did. And I know there's some people that Dr. Tom Davis is a beloved figure. And watching that 2-3 zone, that flat 2-3, and seeing teams shoot 3-pointer after 3, it drove you nuts. And then obviously what we saw here recently on the defensive end of the floor with Fred McCaffrey, outside of the last 2 years with Adam Woodbury in the middle, this team is just brutal on the defensive end. They didn't put in the work. That is not going to be the problem here. Work will be done on the defensive end. You're going to see a team that is going to be connected. They're going to be easy to cheer for. And yeah, we might not be cheering for quite as many of those games in the 80s and 90s, but we're going to see defense. We're going to get defensive stops. We're going to have shot clock violations. You're going to see a team defensively that is so different. Now, who is going to be on this team? And what is the roster going to look like? That's going to be a big part of this conversation. Who's coming back? Who's he bringing along? And who are they going to be targeting in the portal? All important questions, plus what this coaching staff maybe has a chance to look like as we celebrate the signing of Ben McCollum, the new Iowa basketball coach, plus a weekend wrap-up from everything else going on in the Hawkeye world of athletics. It's a busy day here as we kick off the week. Stay right there. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more fun and more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the tournament, as I was last night, squeezing in a round of golf after work, let's get a little warmer for that, or just trying to keep up with a busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Staying up late watching hoops last night, down to the wire, Oregon, on the wrong side of that one, plus a 3.5 in the tournament action. 5-Hour Energy, though, to kick off my Monday, helps me going all throughout the day. And with longer days, getting that extra outside time, absolutely great. How about Tropical Burst, my go-to flavor for a quick boost? Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. On the go convenience for you. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or a 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5-Hour Energy. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. As we continue, let's take a peek at what this roster has a potential to look like in year number one. Now, we are talking about this moments after the official announcement came down, and we start right there. So at the top of the list, and it's a guy that I just talked about, is Bennett Sturts. Bennett Sturts, a 6'4" point guard. You see the emergence that he made, his ability to control the game. And if maybe you just saw Drake for the first time, maybe it was in the Missouri Valley Championship game, in the NCAA tournament, these couple of games, whatever it was. If you don't have a deep amount of knowledge, this dude played basically every minute this season. He led the country in minutes played. And outside of a game that Drake played against a D2 school, he was out there seemingly every single minute. He controls everything. The ball is in his hands, and what they did and how good they were, how efficient they were offensively, all goes to Bennett Sturts. Now, weeks and weeks ago, before even Iowa, Ben McCollum was anything on the official radar, I was told that Kansas State was going to be the likely destination for Bennett Sturts, that he was going to finish up his career. And then before this all became official, and I told you, if you're an everydayer, you remember this from last week, that I had multiple people tell me, pump the brakes on that. Now there's more people, certainly with deep connections to the McCollum staff, to the Sturts family. Truly Donovan, the online persona from Twitter, who's deep into the college basketball world and knows basketball news. He has mentioned that he anticipates, he had a tweet out this morning talking about Sturts making his way to the Big Ten. Well, we know the connection. He said McCollum and Sturts in the Big Ten. So, possibility. Why did it take so long for this to come together? I'm sure things like that. For Ben McCollum, who grew up a Hawkeye fan, grew up in the state, was born in Iowa City, grew up in Storm Lake. He's my age. He's a good dude. I can tell. One of my kind of guys. I hope that this works because this is one of my guys. This is one of the people in my era. So we need this one to work. But that aside, Sturts, though, is a number one at the top of the list. What he does with point guards, you start right there, and the finances to make it work. Beth Getz, the Swarm Collective, all working together to try to build up the NIL resources for Iowa to be able to compete. I was never going to be Indiana, and they're still going to be towards the bottom of the Big Ten. But when the gap between you and even the average teams in the Big Ten in terms of your, what it is, a payroll, is as big as it was the last couple of seasons, there's a problem. And it feels like this fan base is starting to be reinvigorated, something that definitely needs to happen. So you start right there. After that, what's next? Now, a lot of people talking about Josh Dix. You see some of the programs that he is involved with. Creighton, Kansas, Kentucky. They got deeper pockets than Iowa. Even with Iowa, with these additional resources that they are putting into basketball, those are programs that play at a different level. If it's all about money, Iowa doesn't have a shot to get Josh Dix back. But you hope maybe there's a little something more. And it'll be up to Ben McCollum and the new coaching staff to figure out a way to sell him. I would put that personally, without any insight on this one. This is not an insight-driven conversation. I would say that this is going to be the most difficult of the names that we're talking about. Bryce Sanford, Cooper Koch, both those guys, the connections to the program. Cooper's dad, JR, played at Iowa, about the same age, a little bit older than Coach McCollum. I'm sure a lot of people in the basketball world, they know each other, the connections there. Bryce Sanford, brother just finished up. He's going to command some money too. And all these guys. But if you can get that as your foundation, Sturts, Koch, Sanford, guys with college experience coming back, and then you throw in kind of this next tier of guy. Now, two guys from this year's team that I was a little bit surprised have not entered the transfer portal at this point, at least as we tape it, Seydou Traore and Chris Tajo. Tajo, we know, an incredible athlete, very raw. You think of him in the back end of the way they play defensively and just with that raw athleticism and a coach that is going to teach you how to play in that end, gets a little intriguing. And then Seydou Traore, same thing. Good athlete, showed some skill offensively, put him with a coaching staff that is going to coach things in a different way. That gets a little bit exciting. Another name, Isaiah Johnson Arrigu, the transfer from Miami, kid from Minnesota, was a top 150 player coming out, 4-star player out of high school. Played 10 games in Miami, didn't do much. before transferring in midway. And another name also on the list is Diakite, who is one of the high school prospects that has not decommitted. Now, the biggest name on the list I think we got to talk about is Josh Lewis. So Josh Lewis was one of the highest ranked recruits that Iowa basketball had ever received. He was formerly committed to South Florida, decommitted after their coach tragically died last year. And Iowa nabbed him. Now, people will say one of the main reasons that they nabbed him is because of Tristan Spurlock. So that leads us to our next conversation. Josh Lewis has decommitted, but door's not closed and signed anywhere else. Again, at least a time of recruiting. Stuff like this is going to happen fast. And that's why you got to be with us every day, because some of these things are going to be happening very, very fast. But as we know it right now, so Josh Lewis, the connection to Tristan Spurlock, Courtney Eldridge, Matt Gayton, some of the holdovers from the previous staff. Sherm Dillard is not going to be retained. I without having any knowledge, I will guarantee you that. How about that? We'll put a guarantee stamp on that. If I'm wrong, all right, I'm wrong. But I don't believe Sherm is going to be part of this staff. Remember also, you're allowed 5 assistant coaches. That is something that is different than the old days. And certainly the last time that we went through a coaching change at Iowa is that now you're allowed 5 assistant coaches. And because of that, you have a little bit more depth. So does it make sense to retain a couple of guys? Does it make sense to retain both Matt Gaytons and a Tristan Spurlock? Keep both of those guys on. If you can get Josh Lewis to come along with it, you head that direction. Is that something that would make sense? Josh Sash is another one. He's at Drake with Coach McCollum, Tyler Sash's brother. Great article in the Register by Tommy Birch talking about that and the background. So you can build a staff in a different way than what we're used to. And how many of the Drake guys are going to come along? Outside of Sash, is there going to be more to the story on that front? But building this roster is also going to go hand in hand with the way that you build your coaching staff. And that's where we are. It's an exciting time. It really is. I'm super pumped up for this. I think they got this right. And yes, normally the expectations with any coach is you got your guy. But as I look around, I look at where Iowa basketball is and the way the program has been, in a way, forgotten. This is about as good as it gets. This is a guy that has been able to squeeze the most out of his program as possible. Maybe this is a guy that is a little bit better fit. This is a guy that's not going to be out on the golf course a bunch, not going to be out on the town. He's not going to be that kind of coach. He just loves basketball. And is he going to have a $7.5 million NIL budget to work with? No, it's not going to happen in Iowa. But that can be okay. Because if you're an elite level coach, as he proved at the Division II ranks, proved in one season at the Division I ranks, then those little differences, those little edges, they show up on the hardwood. You're going to get that from this dude. I truly believe that. I know at times here on the program, I can be pretty pessimistic. I can get down. I think it's the course of just doing this and doing this for as long as I have now. Being in sports radio for over 20 years. Doing this daily podcast now for a number of years and talking Hawkeyes every single day. And at times, you start to get to the negativity. And it's frustrating, and it's not always fun. It's just the way sometimes your mind goes. Because I can't be optimistic all the time. I can't be sunshine and rainbows. And because maybe I have too much hurt. I like to talk about the scar tissue, right? I've just built up too much scar tissue as a Hawkeye fan throughout the years to be sunny optimistic all the time. Because that's not reality. I'm pumped up for this one. I think they got the right guy. Could have egg on my face. It takes work. Sometimes it takes a little luck. I always got the guy to make it happen. We continue. It wasn't just about the men's basketball team. The women getting ready for their matchup later today against Oklahoma. We'll talk about that. The weekend that was both on the baseball and softball diamond, and another champion for Iowa wrestling. All as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks. Curation makes it easier to find better value on tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. Game Time Picks makes it happen and finding that great value just for you. And peace of mind. You can view your seat before you buy. I absolutely love that part of the Game Time app. And another thing, no more surprise fees. How many times have you been there, thought you had a great deal, then all those fees are there? It looks a whole lot different. Not the case with Game Time. Their lowest price guaranteed. All of it makes you able to book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hit subscribe if you're watching. If you're listening on the podcast side, 5-star review. So a lot going on this weekend. Stephen Buchanan gets it done. 1 for 3 in the finals at NCAA wrestling. Penn State, even in a tournament where they didn't wrestle, I didn't think of their best. They still break another record and just some dominating ones. We went down to heavyweight. Gable Steveson goes down in the championship bout to Hendrickson. Just an incredible scene on top of that one. But right before that is where we got to see Stephen Buchanan win the title at 197 pounds. A guy that was really easy to root for. You can see what it meant to him, his family, which is always great. You know, wrestling, they do it right. And you get the background. You see these guys, everything that goes into it, the families, the emotion, all of it. Just a great, great scene at NCAAs. And after comes down to the wire, an overtime loss for Drake Ayala. And love it or hate it, the reality is the 6 seconds of riding time was not great. That it comes down to that. But is it better than having to ride a guy out the other way and then you get into the stalling? Now, there were some stalling calls in that match. I know that frustrated people. But I thought Bird was the more aggressive wrestler overall during the course of the match. Just a little more fuel to the fire for next year for Drake Ayala, where I think he's going to finally break through and get that NCAA championship. We also saw like Messenbrink against Caliendo. What can you do? The guy's an absolute machine. We know that the gap was pretty significant. Caliendo at least hung around, right? Didn't embarrass himself as he doesn't because he's a stud in his own right. There's a generational talent, as it seems like Penn State's got a bunch of generational talents, which is frustrating. But finally back to Buchanan and getting that national championship after beginning his career out in Wyoming, becoming an All-American there, going to Oklahoma, another All-American, and finally getting that final step. What it meant, hearing him afterwards, really, really good scene. Iowa has 3 finalists. They go 1 for 3, but still 3 finalists. There were parts of the season that went awry. The injury to Teamer, the injury at the end of Parco. Not the way any of us anticipated it going for both of those guys. But you still look at the future. Like this juggernaut that Penn State's created, it's not going to last forever. And Iowa continues to be in really good position to make a run. To make a run and be able to do a little bit more with this program and ultimately become a national champion again. So with that, yeah, I know David Taylor at Oklahoma State's going to be there also, right? And they also, in year number 1, had 3 finalists. Mentioned what we saw at the end at heavyweight with Hendrickson. It's going to be, I think, overall, though, an ability and an opportunity for this all to come together. For Iowa wrestling to take that step and Penn State to go back the other way. Good work on that front. A couple other updates from the weekend. Go to the Diamond. Sweep for the Iowa baseball team. A necessary one. Now, still a ton of work that needs to be had. And qualify for the Big Ten tournament. That's all well and good. This is going to be, remember, also a different looking baseball season in the Big Ten this year with the additions of the West Coast schools. And yeah, you start with, of course, USC and UCLA and what they are. Okay, UCLA is off to a really good start. They're 18-5 on the season. They're going to be a juggernaut and probably one of the overall favorites, and Iowa won't face them this year. But also Oregon, who's been right there. Washington has been okay and off to a decent start on the season. USC is ranked in the top 50 in the RPI. But Iowa sits at the top now of the Big Ten. Just a few series in, but still at 7-2 after the sweep. Tied with UCLA and Oregon. That's some good work there. One quad one victory, still work to be had there. But overall, Iowa put themselves in good shape to at minimum make the Big Ten tournament. Now it's going to change coming up this week. And better part of a week now is they're going to be going on the road. In fact, it starts in the middle of the week, a little bit of an oddity, as they're going to be making their way to Illinois State. A weekend series against Minnesota, who's ranked very high in the RPI. They're ranked 23rd in the RPI. Another midweek game, that one over at Bradley. And then the following weekend, April 4th through the 6th, they're over at Northwestern. Odd schedule. But got to be able to do it on the road. If they keep this momentum going, and they're able to take the series against Minnesota, we can start to have a little bit different conversation. We could see that coming, though, and things starting to trend in a different direction. One thing that I didn't anticipate we were going to be talking about was the Iowa softball field and what was actually happening between the lines. Iowa, after Coach Gillespie stepped away, then another coaching move, and just the oddity of what was happening, kneeling during the national anthem, and on and on and on. You're left kind of wondering, well, what's happening with this program? This thing's going to fall apart. Where in the world is Gail Blevins, right? Bring Coach Blevins back, because Iowa softball was a power back then. Not the case anymore. Well, now Iowa's 3-1 in the Big Ten after beating 5th-ranked UCLA over the weekend. They're hot. They beat Indiana last weekend, took both games against the Hoosiers, who are pretty good in their own right. Then to get this victory, 7-4 on Sunday, it's an eye-opener. They got South Dakota State coming in this week. Then they go to Wisconsin over the weekend before Nebraska comes back in. The Iowa softball team, maybe this is what they needed to make a little bit of a push, whatever it is. They're playing a high level and great things to see on that front. Well, we're out of time for today. We got a whole lot more coming. I'm Ben McCollum. We will be back with you after the conclusion of the Iowa-Oklahoma game. Later this evening, we will have a rapid reaction podcast for you. The Iowa women against that fast-paced and big Oklahoma team, coached by Jenny Baranchek, the former Jenny Lillis and former Iowa basketball player. We'll have that coming your way after it goes final. 3 o'clock tip-off for that one this afternoon with Iowa and Oklahoma at FanDuel. Iowa currently a 4.5-point underdog. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.